class, and welcome back to the class 12th edition with a brand new poem. Before I really begin with the poem, I would just like to know and understand how much have you been missing your classrooms? And when we talk about classrooms and school setup, haven't you been missing that one particular phrase that we specially use when we enter a library? What actually brings to mind when you enter a library? A very chubby girl hanging on the wall and telling us to be quiet. Isn't it sometimes very irritating when people keep telling you to be quiet? When I say people, it's almost always teachers who keep telling us to be quiet. A teacher walking inside the classroom almost always begins a lesson with keep quiet, silence please. Why is it that silence is always supposed to be golden and speech is always supposed to be silver? Well, not to dwell too much on these lines, because I myself, being a teacher, uses this phrase quite often. And I can well understand, because I was a student long back, and I know how irritating it can be when every teacher, almost everybody in the school setup wants you to be quiet all the time. Well, but coming back to the library, when we are asked to remain quiet, there is one particular objective behind it, and that is not to disturb readers while they are trying to concentrate on their books. But here, when we are talking about the poem that we are going to see, and the name which you can well see here in the background, Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda, is all about the poet asking all the readers who are reading his poetry to concentrate not on others, but for a change on themselves, to concentrate on their actions, on their deeds, to introspect, to retrospect as to what has been going on in their lives, what have we come around to, and where are we moving, where actually are we headed. So this poetry basically is very much impactful in these challenging times when we are sitting at home, very uncertain about the foreseeable future. We do not know what it holds, and we are trying to actually assume too many things too soon and do not know where to go from here. So this is the time which requires us to actually introspect, to see what has happened in the past, what wrongs have we done, what have we done to actually deserve this challenging time of being locked up inside our houses, not knowing when and what is going to happen in the next future ahead. So before I dive into the poetry, let us take a quick look, as has been our tradition, into the poet's life. Now the poet, the very famous Pablo Neruda, was born in the year 1904 and passed away in 1973. And Pablo Neruda was a pen name, a pseudonym, which later turned into a legal name for this famous poet from Chile, who also was a diplomat and a politician. He went on to win the Nobel Prize for Literature in the year 1971. So we have a Nobel Laureate here. And he wrote, almost always wrote in green ink, which was supposed to be his personal symbol for desire and hope. His writings are simple, wherein lies their beauty. Originally written, this work, Keeping Quiet, has been originally written in Spanish, and the essence of this poem is based on introspection and retrospection, as was clearly discussed earlier. The poet feels that some soul searching is required as far as individuals and humankind are concerned, and it is needed for us to be at peace with ourselves and for us to be at peace with the world in general. So that's all about Pablo Neruda. A very brief introduction, but quite a comprehensive one, which we need to understand. He's a Nobel laureate, and obviously his writings have been very much appreciated throughout the world. Now, coming right into the poem. It's a fairly lengthy poem compared to My Mother at 66. You cannot expect all the poems to be very short, especially when you're in class 12, and we have classic literature when we skim through the pages of the NCERT textbook Flamenco. Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda. Now we will count to 12 and we will all keep still for once on the face of the earth. Let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. So the first stanza begins with a very unusual note, with a very unusual introduction, which says that the poet will count to 12, and after he counts to 12, all of us will keep very still. We are not going to move at all. For once, he says, for a change, let's be all very quiet and still. Let's not make any movement. And for once on the face of the earth, for once living here on the planet Earth, let's just be still. Let's not move, let's not work, let's not do any kind of activity, but just remain still. Let's not speak in any language. Let us not speak any word at all, whether it's English, Hindi, Marathi, Sanskrit, whichever language we follow. Let's just keep quiet. We are not required to open our mouths at all. Let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second. Just for a second, let us stop everything. Let us stop our speaking. Let us stop our moving about. Let us stop all activities. Keep everything down and remain quiet. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much, and let us not move our arms so much. Now, when we talk about moving our arms so much, are we babies that he's asking us to move our arms so much? No. When he's talking about arms here, it also points, there's a clear pun on the word arms. Please note this, because there have been questions asked in the board exams regarding this. Kindly note, there's a pun on the word arms, and this pun denotes two meanings of the word arms. Here, arms are also the body parts, the hands that we have, and arms also signify weapons. So here it is an indirect appeal by the poet to all of us in general, and particularly the governments of the world which are trying to force wars on each other, the countries waging wars on each other. Let us not use our weapons. Keep aside all weapons, all the things that we fight with, and let us only concentrate and introspect and retrospect on what we have done in life. I'm just repeating the first stanza. Now we will count to 12 and we will all keep still for once on the face of the earth. Let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. Now, coming to the beginning of the poem, now we will count to 12. When you hear the number 12, you will think, what is so special about it? Why only count to 12? Why not till 10? Why not till 9? Why not till 5? So here, children, we have 12. Coming to the explanation of this particular number, there are basically different kinds of interpretations given in different books that you read. 12 can be any number. It can be 10 for you, it can be 5 for me. I know for sure when I walk into a classroom, I have a habit of settling down students by using this particular technique, and I say I'm going to count till 5. After 5, if you're not settled, you're out of my class. So it is 5 for me, but it was 12 for Pablo Neruda. Now there are other interpretations that say that number 12 signifies the 12 hours, the 12 months in a year, the 12 numbers on a clock, the 12 zodiac signs, maybe the 12 gates of the heaven. Well, you keep this interpretation aside, maybe it is going to be helpful somewhere, but we are going to take 12 as any other number wherein the poet was trying to settle down people and saying, I'm going to count till 12, and after 12, you're going to be quiet. So 12 is just any other number for the poet. Now we will count to 12 and we will all keep still for once on the face of the earth. Let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. So we've discussed the pun on the word arms. Kindly make a note of it. Moving ahead, it would be an exotic moment. Without rush, without engines, we would all be together in a sudden strangeness. So the poet continues, he says, and when I have counted 12 and you have become quiet, for once you have stopped all the things that you were doing. You have stopped speaking in any kind of language. When he says stop speaking in any kind of language, it also signifies that language has become a barrier for us. We have linguistic chauvinism creeping in. We want to divide the territory because one territory, one one set of people beyond a territory are speaking another language, and we are using another. So we do not want barriers created by language, and that is why let us not use any language whatsoever. Let us stop speaking completely. So he says it would be an exotic moment. It would be something extraordinary, beyond imagination, something which rarely happens, very exotic, one of a kind. And a place without rush, without engines. When I say without rush, that means without any commotion, without any chaos to outdo each other. There's no mad rat race happening, no competition, no people rushing to reach first, to come first, to stand first, but we are here on a standstill. So there's no rush whatsoever, without engines. Without engines, why only engines? Why not any other locomotive? Here, engines signify machinery as a whole. It can be any vehicle, any kind of machinery. So engines is, here the word engine is a symbol for all kinds of machines. Kindly note it that here the word engines is a symbol, and we have the poetic device symbolism being used here. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. So by remaining quiet, by not moving about, by not participating in a mad rat race, we will all remain together. We are going to be united in a sudden strangeness. Please underline sudden strangeness. It signifies a poetic device called alliteration, the sound of S being repeated. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Suddenly, this world would become a very strange place to live in, because for a second, when everybody stops speaking and moving about, everybody becomes one. We are one because we have no differences remaining. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and for one split second, the fishermen would stop their activities and in the process will not be harming the whales. Here, whales are also symbolic of all kinds of fish in the sea. So not only whales, but also every kind of fish that the fishermen catch. So fishermen, when they stop their actions, when they are quiet and standing still, they will contribute to nature for that particular second, for that particular time, when they would stop fishing and save the fish in the sea. And the man gathering salt would not look at his hurt hands. And the man who has been gathering salt at the seaside and hurting his hands in the process will not be looking at his hurt hands all the time, because he has stopped his activity of gathering sand. He would give that time for his hands to heal, and in the process for nature to heal. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade doing nothing. So here, the next stanza, the poet believes that when we stop our activities and when we give time to introspect, to look into ourselves, to think about what we have been doing all this while, and was it worthwhile at all, we would be, saying no to so many things, and one of these things is wars. Those who prepare green wars. Now, what are green wars? Do you understand green wars to be something, fought with green color weapons? No, these are bio weapons. Bio wars, wars fought with bio weapons. So those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, all kinds of wars, whether they be with weapons, bio weapons, cold wars, no weapons. So here all kinds of wars will stop. Those who prepare victories with no survivors. Please underline that line. It's very, very important. It says victories with no survivors. When we are fighting wars, irrespective of the party that wins or loses, you have dead bodies lying across both the sides. So it is a victory. Whoever wins has a victory in hand with no survivors. Nobody to celebrate it with. It's a sad state, though we win. But is it something to rejoice after losing so many people at the border? No, not at all. So here, it's victories with no survivors. So these people Who are these people now? Are they only the people who are actually fighting the wars, the soldiers? No, they are also diplomats, they are also government officials, they are also countries whose diplomats are waging cold wars on each other. The countries not wanting to have any ties with each other. All these people, for a change, were put on clean clothes. Now, clean clothes here, this term signifies two poetic devices. One is alliteration for sure. The second one, and the more strong poetic device, is symbolism again. Clean clothes symbolize peace. Clean clothes are actually clothes of peace. They would discard their blood-strewn clothes and wear white clothes representing peace instead, standing for peace at the borders, not wanting to wage wars with each other, but instead wanting to be with peace with each other. Would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade, and instead they would shake hands. Okay, not in the COVID scenario, please don't shake hands. Okay, they would maybe, pump fists from from across, and they would not want to have any animosity amongst themselves, but would want to call each other as brothers, treat each other as brothers, and walk in the shade of peace, in the shade of well-being, in the shade of friendship, doing nothing. Again, no activity, only introspecting, only thinking, only retrospecting, not doing anything. What I want should not, now the poet wants you to understand this very clearly, what I want should not be confused with total inactivity. He says he doesn't want you to just sit idle. No, not at all. Empty vessels make the most noise. So he doesn't want any inactivity. Do not confuse introspection with idleness, not at all. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. So he says life should be what it is about. And what it is about, it is all about, living, breathing, uh, basically working. If you are inactive, if you are idle, you are as good as dead. So he says, do not confuse the two things at all. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. So he says, if we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving all the time, and for once could do nothing, just sit for a while, do nothing, stop all your activities, but it's not inactivity because your mind is still working, you're introspecting. Perhaps a huge silence, a silence of huge amount, a huge scale would surround the earth, will interrupt this sadness of always being occupied, of never understanding ourselves, and of threatening ourselves with death, and always constantly threatening ourselves with death. And that is why we are always assuming that we should be on the move all the time. So he says, do not confuse my teachings, my thoughts about introspection with inactivity. No, I do not want anything to do with death. I have no truck with death, he says. I do not want anything to do with death. I'm not asking you to be inactive and dead at the same time. I'm asking you to live, but live with a new feeling of zeal and zest and of healing the world. Rejuvenating your surroundings by creating an atmosphere of peace, of friendship, of not being there competing with each other all the time, not being in a mad rat race, not being in a rush and chaos all the time, but keeping still for a while and actually thinking about your actions. What have we done to contribute to the world? Are we still there? Are we going to be what we wanted to be? Or are we just moving without any purpose? This is what he wants us to think about. We should not be always in the rush and always never understanding ourselves, not trying to actually think what we want in life, but still competing, still moving for no reason at all. Just because everybody does that, are we going to be in that race without any soul searching, without any questioning on what has to be done in the next step? This is where we have landed today. Why are we forced to lock ourselves inside our houses? Did we actually think about this pandemic coming in? Why? And if not, why? Why were we not aware about it? That if we are going to harm nature, is nature not going to retaliate?
Is it not going to get back at us? So this is the time, best time in our lives to sit at home, introspect, retrospect. What have we done to deserve this? And where are we headed from here? So here again, the poet ends with a couplet. He says, now I'll count up to 12 and you keep quiet. He says again, okay, fine, I'm going to begin. I've explained myself enough. I've told you why I want you to be quiet. So I'm going to count up to 12 and you keep quiet. Just keep quiet and you know what is to be done and I will go. And I'm going to leave you with this introspection. And I hope that this introspection, this amount of soul searching is going to be very, very fruitful for you as well as for me. So this is it for class 12, Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda. I hope you keep quiet now and watch the video.